Welcome back. Big news today. We have a great jobs report. The lowest unemployment rate in almost 6 years. Thank you, Mr. President. But we are not out of the woods yet. I want you to look at the answer to our Crossfire quiz. We still have 3.3 million Americans who are working at or below the minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. Now, unfortunately, the Republicans won't let the president give these workers a raise. Now, check this out. You have Republicans, they don't want laws that promote equal pay for women, unemployment insurance. They don't want to extend the runway for active job seekers who need gas money to get to their job interviews, and no raise for Americans. But that's not the nuttiest part. Now you have Republicans like Tom Coburn saying crazy stuff like this, quote, "I don't believe there ought to be a national minimum wage." That's my position. So in the Crossfire tonight, we've got Republican Representative Andy Harris, Democratic Representative Barbara Lee, both in the Crossfire tonight. I'm going to go to you. Are you willing to go on the record endorsing this radical view from Coburn that says America shouldn't even have a national minimum wage?
We certainly ought to raise we shouldn't raise the national minimum wage. I was with a small business owner in my district, rural area, and she was very worried because she has a small business. She wants to hire people.
Sure. But I'm not going to let you out of this. Yes or no? Is a national minimum wage a good idea or a bad idea?
Should be left where it is.
So you're for it. You're for a national minimum wage.
Where it is.
Exactly where it is. Not a penny less, not a penny more.
And
it just happens to be perfect right now.
If states want to increase it, or cities, God bless them. But if the jurisdiction doesn't, it should be where it is.
Now, since you're talking about the raise, make sure you know the vast majority of the American people, 69% of the American people, actually agree with me that we should raise the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour. Only 23% disagree with that. Why are you smarter than 69, 70% of the American people?
Well, I'll bet you didn't ask the question, well, what if raising the minimum wage to $10.10 lost 500,000 jobs to the American economy? Because that's what nonpartisan CBO says. I bet you the question wasn't asked that way.
Andrew, I was a small business owner before I came to Congress for 11 years, 300-plus employees. Believe you me, we not only paid a higher minimum wage, we paid a living wage. Productivity was off the scale, no turnover. You can't tell me that when companies pay decent, good wages with good benefits, they make money.
Then they would pay higher wages. That's the way the market works. It's not the president who gives anybody a wage. It's a small business owner who's giving someone a raise. And believe me, if they thought that productivity would go up, they'd be giving them a raise.
So let me ask you this question, since you're a good advocate for this. The mayor of Seattle is proposing that the minimum wage ought to go up to $15 an hour.
Good for him.
So,
in California, more than likely, from what I remembered, a living wage where people could live and take care of their families and move toward achieving the American dream was about $25, $26 an hour.
So would you support that as a minimum wage for California?
Absolutely, I would support it for California. I think the regional
And you don't think that would affect unemployment?
No. Trust me. Believe you me, you would have a more productive workforce. You would have people who could afford to live in areas now where they cannot afford to live. You would increase diversity in certain communities where you don't have diversity anymore. You would have economic parity, and the income gap would begin to close.
Let me shock my good friend here. I'm going to be bolder than Tom Coburn. Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, is visiting today. Germany is the most productive country in Europe. It has 40% of its young people in apprenticeship programs. It has no minimum wage. In fact, if you look at Western Europe as a group, the countries that have a minimum wage have 13.8% unemployment. The countries with no minimum wage, and these are, by the way, higher income countries. These are Norway, Sweden, Austria, Switzerland, Germany. They have 6.3% unemployment. Now, what's wrong with this picture? Here are countries that say we're going to be economically productive. They have half the unemployment rate of the countries that have a social welfare state. What am I missing here?
Well, I lived in England for 2 years, so I know Great Britain, and I know Europe very well. And one you're missing is they have a safety net. First of all, they have universal health care. They have young people have access to education. Cost of housing is much lower. Their governments ensure that there's a minimum standard of living, and in fact, the unemployment compensation is there for them. In fact,
I'm going to shock you too. I think California ought to raise its minimum wage really high, so maybe even Maryland can get some more jobs, because they will leave California. They just did. I mean, Toyota left for Texas. Believe me, it's because the taxes are high. One of the reasons you need a living wage that high in California is they tax everything that moves in California.
Well, let me move to a different topic related, though. You're talking about the people who are unemployed. You're concerned about that. You want people to be able to get work. Why won't you Republicans in the House support the bipartisan Senate bill to extend that runway under those active job seekers? I do not understand your position on unemployment insurance. These are active job seekers. These are people who are trying to get work, and you got a bipartisan solution in the Senate. Are you for it or against it?
I've signed on to the bipartisan solution in the House. It says you extend the unemployment, but you build the Keystone Pipeline.
Exactly. Put all this stuff on.
Well, paying for it?
You didn't do that under George W. Bush. How can you? You got people watching you right now.
I thought this is the worst crisis we've had. This is the most we've ever spent on unemployment. This is whether I'm going to ask my children and grandchildren to pay for unemployment this year. I think if we pay for it, I've signed on to the bill. I've signed on to Charlie Dent's bill.
That's mean. There are 3 million
people living on the edge. No, what's mean is telling my grandchild. What's mean is telling my children and grandchildren to pay for that.
These 3 million people who lost their unemployment at the end of December are living, many are living in cars now. They need their unemployment. This is an emergency.
And we should. The bill is in the House. All it says is
back to Europe.
You don't get disability plus unemployment
insurance. You don't treat people like that, Andrew.
Here's the thing.
That's not American.
There is actually a bill that has passed in the Senate that doesn't do all these tricks. Look, when George W. Bush was president, you extended it. You didn't try to figure out all kind of pay-for-it and stick in your favorite projects. You said, listen, let's take care of Americans. Don't you love Americans now?
I'm going to shock you. The Senate's a little different from the House. The Senate wants to spend money without thinking about its effect on the fiscal situation. The House actually wants to act responsibly.
The whole argument's wrong, because when if George W. Bush was president, the Keystone Pipeline would be completed by now.
And you would have 33 permanent jobs.
Our values are: we are our brother's keeper, we are our sister's keeper. We should be careful that we don't start playing around with that value. People deserve to, they pay into unemployment.
Aren't we also our children and our grandchildren's keeper? Don't we owe them some obligation to not bankrupt them?
Yeah, but you don't need to play them against each other. People have paid into unemployment. They deserve their unemployment.
This is from general revenue. This has nothing to do with paying into unemployment. We do things like say, look, that you should actually, if you claim the dependent child care tax credit, you actually ought to have a Social Security number on your tax return. $4 billion a year paid illegally by the IRS for that. It could pay for all the unemployment
3 million people deserve their unemployment, Andrew, and you should vote for it.
Let's give it to them.
You should vote for it.
Now, hold on a second. Two things. First of all, every single time anything happens in America, you guys scream Keystone Pipeline. Last night, we were talking about Putin and how to stop Putin, a tyrant, from eating Europe. You know what the answer was? Build the Keystone Pipeline. I just want to make sure you know, people back home know, you're talking about 3,000 temporary jobs for 1 year and 33 permanent jobs patching the pipe. 33 permanent jobs patching the pipe.
The world.
Man, you can take it off the table by building it. If you build it, it won't come up again.
But to hold people hostage for a signal on Keystone is not an American value. The majority of American people would say no way to that.
You need to give me a shot here. Stay here. I want you at home to weigh in on today's fireback question. Do you agree with the Seattle mayor that the minimum wage should be raised to $15 an hour? Tweet yes or no using hashtag Crossfire. We'll have the results after the break. We also have the outrage of the day. I'm outraged that only billionaires are lining up to buy the Los Angeles Clippers. Shouldn't the American people get a chance as